Hi, this is TheHande. Recently on this channel I made a video where I talked about the Finnish school system because I wanted to use that as a kind of an introduction to talking about other topics related to Finnish schools. And today we're gonna tackle a big one, which is religion in Finnish schools. And before we get to the religion part, I think we need to discuss a little bit why is religion a school subject in Finnish schools. What does it actually contain? And more importantly, what it is not. So first of all, why is religion a subject in Finnish schools? Some people may be a little weirded out by that because my impression has always been that people always view Nordic peoples as being fairly secular or whatever. Well, the reason is the same reason why anything is in the Finnish school curriculum, because it has something to do with Finland as itself. Finland's official national church is the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Church, or Ev.Lut, as it says in my tax forms. And because it is such a big fixture in everyday Finnish life, and especially with big Finnish life events, such as birth in the forms of baptisms, marriages, and then of course funerals, the Ministry of Education of course has decided that it would be helpful for students to understand what the church is, why does it exist, and what are the broad historical reasons for why Lutheranism specifically has become the national church of Finland. So that's what I want to stress here, is that religion in Finnish schools should be understood as a kind of a humanities subject that combines elements of history, cultural studies, and obviously a little bit of liturgy. It is also a subject that you can choose to do in your matriculation examination in high school. And of course, if you then go on to study it on the university level, there it is referred to as theology. Ev.Lut is kind of the default setting for religious education in Finland, but obviously all Finns do not belong to that denomination. And so most schools usually have options for other religious denominations as well. The most common around here is Eastern Orthodox, because Finland has always traditionally had a lot of Eastern Orthodox individuals due to our proximity to Russia. And these days there's obviously an ever-growing number of people belonging to the Muslim faith as well. And then there might be other smaller special cases for other denominations depending on student-by-student basis. Now, what if you're non-denominational, that is to say, officially you're not a member of the church? Well, there's two different options for you. One, you can still get Ev.Lut religious education if your parents decide to enroll you in that. Or you have an option of another subject, which I will be, for simplicity's sake, calling ethics in this video, but the fully translated Finnish name of the subject literally means worldview lessons. Now, because I unfortunately don't have first-hand experience on this one, I've only had a look at the curriculum, I can't speak very authoritatively on this, but basically ethics as a school subject in Finland is meant to educate children on the difference between right and wrong, why things are a certain way, and why the broader Finnish cultural ethical views have developed in a certain way. And ethics is also a subject that you can write in your matriculation examination as well. So what exactly is taught in Ev.Lut religious class? Well, first of all, like I said, it's kind of impossible to talk about Christianity without getting a little bit into the liturgy of the subject. However, back when I went to school, we did not really use a Bible in religion class, at least not until year 8 or 9, I think. So while the curriculum does include learning about some of the major characters in the stories in the Bible, this is done through curated textbooks with very simplified versions of those stories, because the actual language in the Bible would be a little bit too difficult for children to understand. The second part is church history, and it tends to coincide with history as it is being taught in schools in general. I realized this after the video that I didn't even mention history even once in that video, which I admit that was a pretty big no-no because history is actually one of my favorite subjects. But anyway, it of course includes the formation of the first Christian churches, then Christianity becoming main religion of the Roman Empire, the schism into the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, and then of course the Reformation, where we get the whole Lutheran thing. And then during the final years of religious education, although this might have changed since when I went to school, we also start to compare between different Christian denominations, but also other world religions, which was always another thing that I found really, really fascinating about religion class. And then maybe Christian ethics, like at the very, very tail end. But that was more of a thing in high school. They even had an entire course for it, which I did take. Now, one very important thing about religion as a school subject in Finland is that the curriculum actually demands that the education is non-indoctrinal in nature, to set it very distinctly apart from confirmation school. So that is to say that the religious education in Finnish schools is not in any way sponsored by the church. It is organized by the school itself and by qualified teachers who have subject qualifications in the subject. That is to say that the religious education has to be very heavily fact-based, and teachers aren't allowed to make statements that somehow places Christianity as being somehow exceptional from other religions or stuff like that. And this used to be kind of a big deal. I remember in high school, my teacher actually said very recently the school had to drop one of the textbooks it had been using because some of the language in there did not conform to the national curriculum, and the school could have actually gotten into legal trouble over it. Now, in the Finnish Lutheran tradition, confirmation school is where you formally actually become a member of the church. Like, yes, you can get baptized, but until you have completed confirmation school, usually during the year when you turn 15, you're still not officially considered member of the church. Oh yeah, and the thing in my hand, by the way, is my confirmation school Bible. So I was a bit shocked to discover when I started confirmation school that I was actually non-denominational. Yes, both me and my sister were baptized as babies, but between then and before we started school, my parents left the church. But according to my mom, she and my dad decided to enroll us in religion class with the other kids just so that we wouldn't be like the weirdos who didn't attend religion class for some reason. But that then did mean that when I went to confirmation school, I actually had to wait until I turned 15, and this is why my confirmation photos all have a Christmas tree in the background. Now, as you can probably understand, in the last 20 years, however, the whole role of religion in schools has become a little bit more touchy, and this is because of a lot of parents having a lot of hookups about religion. And I do need to stress that part of the equation. Like when I went to school, we usually had like church services during Christmas and Easter that the students just attended, and usually all the students attended even if they were non-denominational. Not because they actually cared about the service, but because they didn't want to just hang around the school with a teacher in a classroom while everybody else was away. But that is one of the things that has really changed in recent years. These days, if there's any kind of religious element in a school event and a student happens to be non-denominational and decides that they don't want to attend that event, then the school is basically required to then have an equivalent event that the student can attend, which can be a bit problematic because, what exactly is an equivalent event to like a church service? This is especially problematic these days with Christmas, but I have also noticed that schools tend to handle this very differently, that there doesn't seem to be any kind of real rules about this. Like at one school, they held a Christmas event where there was very clearly a nativity play at the very start, yet all the students were present regardless of religious denomination. But then at another school, we actually didn't even have a Christmas event, we just had an elf celebration, meaning that there was no nativity play or no Christmas hymns, and the only things that were allowed were just generic Christmas songs and then Santa Claus. So don't get me wrong, I do understand that if parents have hookups about religion or Christianity even specifically, I can understand that if there's a very earnest worry that they want their kids not to be exposed to that stuff, I can understand why those kinds of special considerations have to be made. The big problem that I have, though, is that I have noticed that most of the time, especially the non-denominational kids, they just don't care. Religious services in Finland can be, a little bit bookish, to be honest. And I get the feeling like the kids just tolerate sitting down for an hour. But this has become a huge issue because, for instance, there have been a couple of instances where schools have had, like, musical artists visit the school and where they just, sing a bunch of songs for the kids and then tell some uplifting stories about their school days. And unfortunately, in a few instances, they might have performed a song that might have had some religious references, and I remember one school actually got fined because they had not informed the kids about the fact that there were songs with religious lyrics, which took also the performer by surprise because he was under the impression that this was very clearly agreed upon, though eventually that fine was later revoked. But that's what I'm basically saying, is that the school religion stuff has become almost a little ridiculously touchy. And the one really ridiculous thing that even I get a little annoyed by has to do with end of school year ceremonies and one particular song or hymn that has become a subject of controversy as well. This is something that I'm pretty sure the kids these days don't have. When I went to school, every kid had their own little book of hymns, and whenever we did go to like Christmas church or something else, we were supposed to always carry these around, and you can tell that really got tossed around at the bottom of my backpack or whatever. So as far back as I can remember, Finnish school ending ceremonies have always included something called Suvivirsi, or the spring hymn, which more specifically is the hymn 571 in the Finnish hymn book. And because it's a hymn, obviously it is a religious song, but my understanding is that the reason this has basically become the school ending song is just because it's a very nice, pleasant song about how spring has come and everybody now gets to leave school and have a good time. It does make references to God in several of the verses, obviously. And this too has become a bit of a problem for schools because it is a religious song. So for many years now, schools have been incredibly unsure whether or not they can perform this during just a generic school celebration or whether or not it's not allowed. And the thing is, I have seen multiple different takes on this. Some schools have actually elected to change the lyrics to remove all the religious references, therefore turning it from a spring hymn into a spring song. But then other schools, they just will perform it together, and if you don't want to join in on the song, you don't have to. And look, if a school, for instance, elects not to perform this song and just does another nice, uplifting song in its place, in my view, there's nothing wrong with that. But the spring hymn is such a nice sounding song that I always get a little annoyed that people are now treating it as this touchy thing that shouldn't be allowed because it's a religious song or whatever. And that's the thing that really kind of just annoys me about this whole thing. Because, again, like I said, the point is not to indoctrinate kids into the Lutheran Church. The point isn't even to indoctrinate them into any kind of Christian faith. The point of religion in schools is just that it's just part of the culture and we should have at least a good base understanding of all these things. This is a thing that I think gets blown out of proportion in the conversation about whether or not religion has any role in schools or whatever. So anyway, that was just a broad smorgasbord of various topics relating to how religion is studied and how it's present in school life. I hope you found that interesting, and I hope to bring you another topic about another subject that gets people riled up in Finnish schools. I'm TheHande. See you on the next one.